Good morning and welcome everyone to the second webinar in the AT series, Navigating the Future of TTM in Auckland. Today we will hear from three speakers from Auckland Transport. So we'll be hearing first from Gavin Orenke, then Lawrence Jones, and at the end, Maddie Payne. We will run through the slides and provide with some information. These will be available to download from the TTM webpage early next week, along with a recording of the webinar as well. A couple of housekeeping items before I hand over to Gavin. So for question and answers, please use the Q&A function at the top of the webinar. Feel free to drop your questions, queries in as we go through the presentation. These will be moderated by a couple of people behind the scenes, and so we'll post these to the public chat function for everybody to see, and we'll come through and answer those questions at the end of the session. Cameras and mics are muted for this session, so please use the chat function if you want to convey any messages to the team here. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Gavin Orenke to kick us off today. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan, and welcome everybody. As Dan mentioned, my name is Gavin Orenke. I head up the Works Coordination team here in AT in Road Corridor Access and Coordination. And just as a recap for those who missed our first webinar, these are the three documents that AT have produced for their regulatory staff who will carry out functions and tasks under the NZG TTM banner. They're in their first or draft version, and we anticipate there will be iterations as we progress their development and adapt to changes within a changing industry. They are really our best first step towards operating entirely under a risk-based system. Fairly self-explanatory by their titles, and we'll cover them in more detail shortly. The first two documents are available on our TTM transformation webpage, and those links are listed further down in this slide deck. So with regards to network access coordination, always good to start off with a vision. We're looking for coordinated management of the network and pursuing opportunities for collaboration and efficiencies across the ecosystem. Hopefully not too wordy for a vision, but kind of conveys the message that we're looking at this holistically. The usual and expected why questions. We're looking for opportunities to reduce network disruption. Reduced network disruption should equal reduced customer complaints. We all play a part in protecting network integrity. Movement equals productivity. Relevant for not only road users or bus patrons or cyclists, but also for those people who create work and want to get work done. If you can't move around on the network, how can you get your work done? So it's meant to be, that is meant to be a holistic statement, inclusive of those who create work. Early communications, if we engage earlier, we have more effective communication to those who should receive it. And optimized delivery solutions. We want to reduce risks in a balanced way. We want to reduce risk on network impact. We want to keep workers safe. We need to do this all in a balanced way. We acknowledge that you as stakeholder PCBUs have pressure to get work done, and our focus is on streamlining and optimizing process. The volume of requests for corridor access is large, and our NAC engagement concept needs to be optimized. The process needs to be optimized in order to maintain these effective outcomes. As far as timing goes, the NAC, as it's outlined in the guide and in the New Zealand Guide to Temporary Traffic Management, is going to be phased in. Currently, our permitting software allows for basic NAC and 3Cs engagements, and this will be developed as we progress with the risk-based transition. With regards to who, I'll kind of head these slides up, who, when and what. Here's a basic representation of the PCBUs involved in the delivery of work in the road corridor and how we as AT propose at a high level to manage. The key message is that there are interconnected relationships between stakeholders when it comes to planning work, and is something that AT will look to develop under the NAC banner. So during the engagement process, be it earlier or later, AT may triage plans or applications into two basic categories: those that require further engagement and a more detailed discussion, and those that don't. The objective is to improve disruption response, optimize TTM setups, and manage space and time requests more effectively. The optimization there is key. If there are applications and requests for corridor access that can be expedited, we see no reason not to. Recognizing the different perspectives of the groups here, principals, contractors, and subcontractors, you've all got a different view, you've all got different drivers and demands, and you've all got different interconnected relationships. And we'd like to recognize that those relationships are sometimes connected and sometimes not, and we'll have to just flex accordingly as we engage with you. Noting also 3Cs, 3Cs as outlined in the New Zealand Guide to Temporary Traffic Management. They apply continuously through at various points along the supply chain. Whether you're a principal, a contractor, or a subcontractor, 3Cs engagements and the concept of 3Cs applies to you, and it could be in different forms. From a timing perspective, this graphic shows the lead up to work being carried out in the road corridor. The push here is for early engagements between PCBUs and AT as early as possible. That's a key word, as possible. And we do recognize that early engagement with AT is already business as usual for some PCBUs, both in the principal space and in the contractor space, contractor/subcontractor. At present, we call this a works coordination review, which many of you will recognize. And the names may change over time to better reflect industry practices. But the concept overall remains early engagement, put our heads together, move the big rocks out the way so that we don't leave the major decisions and considerations to the orange and the red area, which is we kind of see as a month away from work happening, which is where the black bar is, that big black bar is sitting. Obviously, this planning timeline doesn't differentiate between the different stakeholder groups, so we'd expect the relevant stakeholder interactions to occur at the appropriate time. For example, during planning, up to 5 years in advance, engagements would most likely be held with asset owners and principals, and then as delivery phases approach, engagements would shift to contractors and subcontractors. Well, with principals holding oversight as the sponsor of the work. This is key for us. We don't want to differentiate between the PCBUs. There will be shifts in focus, but we don't want to entirely separate groups from one another. And again, in the context of NAC, the 3Cs are not one-off actions, but continuous activities that underpin every stage of the risk management life cycle. I've lifted that in inverted commas directly from the New Zealand Guide to Temporary Traffic Management. Still on the early engagement, but just in a different format, represented here by the various stages with opportunities to connect. As I said before, while acknowledging that many of you here today support the concept of early engagement, we still see plans being presented far too late in the process, especially for those plans where network impact could be significant. So I guess this is a call out to project creators and project planners. If you see that your planned activity is going to fall on a corridor that's could cause significant disruption, or is in a high profile area, or is in an area with a lot of other work going on, reach out to AT, my team in particular. However, we're all available for contact, and we can get those engagements underway. We've colored the more applicable stages in green, where we see opportunities to connect. So as an example, we've recently held a number of pre-tender engagements with asset owners who were keen to convey road access conditions to potential bidders, and they were able to do so following the advice given. In our view, pre-tender is the sweet spot. It allows for open and flexible discussions to take place before plans are locked in, but the required amount of detail should be available to have a fruitful discussion. And then noting just below those boxes the groups that we expect to engage with, mainly principals in the early phases, a time where principals and contractors are getting together in the middle, and then mainly contractors down towards the end. You'll see that I've colored we've colored the last 4 boxes in green. That's obviously getting to the pointy end of the process. So we would expect to see a ramp up in engagements. And then just lifted in inverted commas, in quotation marks, from the guide itself, just a nice overview of how what 3Cs means. So admittedly, the guides that I'm talking about have been written by a consultant for us in AT. So you're probably wondering why we're sharing them with you and how they can help you. So just a few key points on what it is we think that sharing the documents with you would benefit yourselves. We've aligned them quite carefully and intentionally to the NZG TTM framework. So what you read out there when you read the guide should be the way that our people are being directed to act and conduct their work. The alignment is key. Focus and outcomes for AT are highlighted and explained so that you know what we're focusing on. That's quite important. It sets us up for building good process. AT's duties, regulatory, legal, and operational. There are many of them. We've got a duty to uphold our various statutory obligations, and the document, the guideline that we've produced for our staff, makes that clear. Internal resourcing requirements are defined. We'd like to reassure you that we've taken all the steps that we should, and as many as possible, to ensure that the right people are in the right teams, knowing the right stuff, to get through risk-based applications and risk-based planning successfully. And lastly, 3Cs is reinforced throughout the delivery life cycle. That one's a key message that we'd like to get across. Be they phone calls, be they emails, be they messages in the system. In my ideal world, it would all be messages within the system, and we would reduce the number of phone calls and emails and Teams messages as engagements, so that we can have trackability and traceability. But we're not quite there yet. So, as I say, the 3Cs engagements could take many forms, but the message is that at all points in the delivery life cycle, 3Cs applies. And then just a kind of a closing slide. We've got access to various systems, and admittedly, so do you as stakeholder PCBUs. You also have access to certain of these systems. We're able to pull them together, hopefully in a cohesive way, looking for proactive network risk management in the via the Forward Works viewer, which now has a transport disruption assessment component to it. We're looking at network impact risks in a multimodal way. So we use mobile road for general traffic, Remix for buses. Pedestrians, we have access to teams who can tell us more about pedestrian considerations. And then just a little bit about stakeholder engagement below. We're looking to stay connected with you via various industry interactions. There may be more webinars in the future. And then on the process side, peer reviewing, possible setup of regional squads to better have a little bit of local oversight where in certain areas, and that all leads to improved network coordination. So yeah, that's me. The key message for me, I think, is early engagement. And if there are any, first of all, questions or items to discuss, or you would like somewhere for your early engagement question to land, our works coordination team is the place to send those queries. So thank you very much. I'll hand over to Lawrence and flick to the next slide.
Thanks, Gavin, and good morning. I just have a few slides talking about corridor access process. As Gavin's already touched on, the 3 Cs will continue to shape our approach to corridor access requests. So this will continue throughout the life cycle, right from Gavin's work right through to us. Building on discussions that you've had in the planning stages, my team will continue to engage with you. We'd ask you to also engage with us collaboratively where you have issues to discuss with your work or there are queries. Clarity is one of the big things that I would ask for there, and that goes both ways. But one of the things that we do see quite often is a lack of descriptiveness about works that's happening, etc. So some of that can resolve issues right up the front if we know exactly what's being done and what's being put in the road. But do approach it with a willingness to collaborate, and that's one of the big things I think we all need to learn as we move through this transition, is to not take an approach as a rebuff or a anything, just to take it and have an open, honest conversation. We do want you to do your work. We just need to know certain things and what's going where. So please do approach it with an open mind. There's been a couple of questions around our system. We will be continuing to use my work sites. That won't be changed. There are some work streams in place with the developers, etc., to look at some enhancements and improvements. These will be coming in from next year. Some of the details aren't actually available at the moment, but some of the things that we're looking at is notifications of live work sites, the scheduling and deployments. There's some enhancements around that to make that more user-friendly and also more useful and real time. There's the car optimization with streamlined functions and internal AT engagements, etc. So some of those processes which are done quite manually at the moment, whereby we have to send emails to other teams, or you may have to engage with other teams via email, looking at some of that being more streamlined within the system so that that notification would go off without anyone having to actually do anything but do the car application. And there's the works coordination module, which is building on the pre-application, looking at conversations that you've had with Gavin's team early on, carrying some of that information through to a car application, where at the moment it's very manual and sometimes requires some rework from both sides to go back and find those notes, etc. So there's a lot of work going on, and hopefully we'll see the benefit of that coming on stream next year. Thank you. Some of the things we're seeing with risk assessments, this is new. However, a lot of it's not really, if we think about it. We've been doing risk assessment in a less formal way even before, looking at what we needed to set up on the road to mitigate the risks of the work happening. At the moment, we're just now having to go through and actually document some of that thinking. And some of that's becoming quite wordy and quite, for instance, we've had submissions of nearly 200 pages, and most of that is all risk assessments. What I would ask here is to try and focus on all of the risks that are associated with your work, not just the work site. We're getting a lot of, for instance, people saying, well, we need to close the road because it's safer. It's possibly safer for the workers, and that's one side, but there's also other issues that come with that. For instance, detours, sending people off on a detour through roads that may be of lesser, used to lesser volumes, for instance, and not therefore have the same level of markings and etc. that can cope with an additional volume. And all of the risks along the detour route need considering and mitigating. Some of those things, showing those in your risk assessments, not just the work site itself. Our primary focus is on the risks to the public travelling around your work site. The workers' risks are your responsibility, and while we do care about workers and their safety, we also care about the public, travelling public, vulnerable road users, etc. And while they're navigating around your works, taking that detour route, perhaps through some lesser controlled intersections, or maybe a school on the detour route or a daycare, those are the things that we care about as well. So your risk as a PCBU doesn't transfer to AT when you put your plan in. At this stage, we're accepting all risk assessment templates. As I've touched on, some of those are quite wordy, and excuse me, a lot of it is cut and paste, a lot of pretty pictures and colors and things, which is great, but if it's just a cut and paste, it's really of no use, and that's coming through strongly where references to previous jobs, etc., or nothing to do with the job in hand. So rather than focusing on a lot of pages, streamlining that, separating it out so that when we get your application, we know which pieces we really need to look at. As I've said, the risks associated with the work and the detours or whatever going on with that work, if they can be clearly labelled and separated out. I know you require to have your pieces as well, but perhaps they could be put into one of the other areas in my work sites so that they are there for everyone, but they are not something that we need to read all the way through. And that will help speed up the review and acceptance of car applications. We will provide further guidance such as practice notes and checklists in the future. That'll be next year at this stage to support you all. We, as I've said, we won't be presenting or preparing a risk assessment form or anything of our own at this stage. We'll continue to accept the various ones that are out there. Just some of the early insights that we're seeing, and these are just meant for sharing so you can see some of the things that we're seeing. And we acknowledge that everyone's going through the change. We are as well. And so it's learning for everyone. So that's in some of my earlier comments there about having those conversations, because it's through those conversations that we're all learning. The other day, for instance, I had a phone call with a guy who had a plan which had quite a number of signs on it, and through our conversation and giving him some things to think on, that plan came down significantly, which meant a lot less on the network, but it also meant that he could do his job still with the same safety in mind, but with a lot less signs. So please do feel free to come to us and talk about those things. As I've said, a broad range of risk assessments. Some are good, some are bad. Please do feel free to work on those and streamline them out. We will get there in the end. It'll take quite a while, I imagine, before the industry settles on something that's useful for everyone. Not all risks are being identified, but be intentional about capturing the risks. So as I've said, all of the risks, not just the ones associated with the worksite. Again, some of the things I've seen really relevant to the worksite, for instance, animals on the road, etc., in urban areas, that's possibly not something that I would really be considering as a risk for me, but it might be for your workers. So please try and think about the risks associated. We want for everyone to go home safely, and that's the workers, but we also want the public, the travelling public, and anyone who is affected by the work, be that a business that's bypassed or a school, etc. So we are trying to look holistically at the whole impact of the location and the region around your worksite. There is a lot of duplication in some applications. For instance, if you've got a stop go onto both sides of the road at exactly the same location, maybe you could just do one risk assessment for them both if they had the same risks, or you could point out on one that there were different risks working on one side of the road perhaps, but some of that stuff would cut down on the stuff that we have to read, as I've said. Separating the risks for workers to the versus the risk of the travelling public, again, covered that off. We are more interested in the latter. Shifting to be more open and collaborative, again, we're happy to have those conversations. Do come to us, do talk to us about things. Sometimes the team cannot answer the phone, and I hear this a lot. I tried to call so-and-so and they didn't pick up. They do have other commitments that they're involved in. There, those of you that have been to the coordination meetings, you know that my team attend those. So while they're in that meeting, they're unavailable. Do feel free to reach out to them and say, can we have a chat on the phone? What time suits you? And I think that's a respectful way for both parties to behave, and to say, you can sort out a lot of things in a 10-minute phone call that may go back and forth, but also do put those notes into my work sites that phone call was had and what was discussed, so that it's clear for everyone if my team members are away. I think that's probably all that I had. So thank you all, and I'll hand over to Maddie.
Thank you, Lawrence. So I'm Maddie. I'm the temporary traffic management lead for events at Auckland Transport. So our team works out of ATOC, the Auckland Transport Operating Centre, and we do a lot of things. We've got two parts of the team. My part of the team look after the traffic management plans, reviewing and approving, and we're also out on site for major events and that sort of thing. We will be on site, being the TMC there, to help out and do what we need to do out on site. So a lot of the things that Lawrence has already talked about will also apply to events. Our process through my work sites, our process through looking at risk assessment, we are aligned with Lawrence's team on that sort of thing. So I think the main difference that I'll be talking about today, on top of what Lawrence has already outlined, is just what makes events and filming a little bit different to roadworks, and some things potentially that need to be thought of if you're doing events and filming as part of your TMPs, or in terms of the network coordination, if you're doing roadworks and you have to consider events and that sort of thing that may be in the area. So events, I'll probably talk more about events because filming can fit a bit more closely to roadworks in terms of you're just isolating the filming activity. Events are very specialised because we've got that mass movement of people, we've got the public transport factor coming in, and we've got the event traffic. So events have never particularly fit well under COPTIM, so I think there's a really good opportunity for everyone here under the new risk-based approach to really make these TMPs more fit for purpose and manage the risks for specifically event risks much better. There's a lot of people who have already been working. I always say we've got one foot in the door for risk assessment, because you guys have been doing that with your event TMPs for longer than I've been in events. It's always about identifying the risks that come along, the mass movement of people, like I said, and how do we manage those risks with something that never fit very well under the COPTM rules. So the transition for event people who work in event TMPs may be a little bit easier. Probably reiterate what Lawrence said, that a lot of these things you are already doing. It's just the formalising of writing them down into your risk assessment, which is really important. There's a lot of things that I know and that I see on site during events that are happening. It's not necessarily reflected in the TMP. So it's that step of saying, you know, we might have event marshals helping runners cross the road because the event's not big enough to close a road, but we still need to manage that movement. Put that down that you're using event marshals, and that's your control for that, and why you chose to do that rather than a stop go or something. That's really what we're looking for. So yeah, event traffic is probably one of the biggest, trickiest things, because with roadworks, traffic is going past your work site and it needs to be managed past your work site, and the network needs to keep moving. With events, the traffic is coming to the event. You've got taxis, you've got Ubers, you've got people getting dropped off. That's a quite a different thing to manage. It's a different risk profile. So that's a big thing to keep an eye on when you're doing your risk assessment. How are people coming and going to your event? What are the public transport options? Is your event putting on buses, and how are they coming and going? How are they separated from the event attendees? And another thing, probably our main focus in our team is really on the safety of all road users, definitely the safety of the attendees coming to the event or participating in the event if it's running or cycling, something like that. But we're also concerned with network impact. A lot of the time, the events have been booked a year in advance or something like that. The tickets have gone on sale. Take Metallica, for example. That's set, that date can't be moved to a more suitable time. It's going to happen then. So how do we manage the network and make sure we've got a balance between road users who are just going past, people coming to the event, people who live in the area? So we're looking at the TMP is fit for purpose. We're looking at your risks that you've identified, and our part is also the consultation part. So we're letting you know what we see, what are the gaps, what you might not have considered. You may have a way that you're managing that and you just haven't put it in your risk assessment. So that's sort of where we're trying to come collaboratively to help use our experience from being on the ground for many of these events, participating in a lot of events, and using that experience and expertise to try and help get the best TMP, the most fit for purpose for keeping everyone safe. I'll just touch a little bit quickly on the NAC aspect. So early engagement is quite key, like I mentioned, for the major events like Metallica or Auckland Marathon or something. The planning for that has been going on for quite a long time before we get the TMP submission. But we know those dates are locked in. So there's a lot of annual events that happen in the same place, same time every year. From roadworks or people who don't do events, but you're doing network coordination, that's probably a really important thing to call out, and something that hasn't necessarily been done particularly well or early enough. I get jumped into meetings when you're sort of 3/4 through the stages of the NAC coordination. And at that point, it's sort of mitigating as best we can. Whereas at the early engagement, if we can let you know what events are on the calendar, we can stage around those. We can make sure that we're having a balance there. Yeah, especially if you're working in an area like around Eden Park, around the Domain, the CBD, there's big events that happen throughout the year. There's ones that happen, like the Santa Parade that just happened on the weekend, that happens every single year. That sort of thing needs to be part of the NAC planning, the NAC coordination. CBD coordination with long-term work sites, that's a big one. So if you are doing event TMPs, if you're an event TMP designer or contractor, those sorts of things, that engagement, you really need to be getting across what is happening in town, what the current road layouts look like, and how the network can still move around town with those long-term sites in place as well as the event. That's something that probably needs a bit more work, and we have been trying to work on it more this year, but that'll be a key focus going forward, is making sure that everything can work and that town doesn't come to a standstill every time there's an event on. Some insights so far. Probably one thing that I'll mention is when you're submitting a TMP, if you're an event TMP person, to make sure that your event organiser is already in contact and started their process with the council for their event permit. We're getting a lot of TMPs coming in where the organiser hasn't even started their conversations with council, and so that holds up things. There's a lot more information that we get if we have that paperwork from the council in terms of what's happening with that event and things that need to be considered. So that really needs to be more working in tandem than it is right now. Contractors who are giving it a go, we're seeing some really good growth in that area, some really good focus on what risks need to be identified and what risks, as Lauren mentioned, probably are not something that needs to be on the TMP. It may be important for your event and your event organizer, but it's not something that needs to be on the TMP risk assessment. It could be on their JSA health and safety documentation instead. That might be things like rubbish bin waste, probably less important for traffic management, but it is an important thing to manage for the event. We have got some really good risk assessments. We've got some that have been huge, where the general form and the TMP forms have basically doubled up on a lot of the risks. The general form is really the one that we will be looking at. That's the one that's intended for the peer review. So putting your focus on explaining the risks there would be really helpful, and using that commentary section to explain why you chose the controls that you chose and how they're mitigating that risk. I think that's one area that we're seeing that needs quite a bit of development. And also that when you do a risk assessment, that you're identifying what is a hazard and what is a risk. If you pop to the next slide, sorry, slide controller, there's something that I've put in there about what is a hazard and what is a risk. But yeah, we have had some risk assessments that have come through where the hazards have been put down and then controls, but that's not a risk. So they might say traffic. Traffic is a hazard. What is the risk that comes along with that? Yeah, this one here. So there you've got the example. The hazard is the thing that could cause harm, the shark in this situation. When the hazard is exposed, what is the risk? What could happen? And how are you managing what could happen? So for this one, you could not go in the water and then you wouldn't get bitten by the shark. Or you could introduce a control to isolate yourself like a shark cage. So when you're talking about events, your hazard might be traffic. What is the risk? Someone could get hit by a car attending the event and they could get hurt or killed. How are you managing that? Why have you chosen that? And how has it reduced the risk? That's really what we're trying to see with the risk assessment. A key thing that Lawrence mentioned before that I'll reiterate for events is that the responsibility for the event attendees, the people coming and going, and the impact on the road users sits with the event organiser as the PCBU. So when the public come out onto the AT roads or footpaths, that risk doesn't then transfer to AT. That risk is with the event organiser until the people go back to a BAU situation. So dispersing from the event, they've caught their mode of transport or they're back onto the footpath as normal. The crowd is dissipated enough that they're just back to BAU and you don't need to control that. Yeah, I think that's all from us. I didn't talk much about filming, but like I said, filming is a specialty activity. It has special considerations. There are things there in your risk assessment that you'll need to take into account. But yeah, identifying the risks well and explaining well why you've chosen the control that you've chosen, I think that'll go a long way with our with our review and our consultation. So yeah, key takeaway I think for events is that mass movement of people. We're dealing with a lot of people and we're dealing with a lot of traffic coming into the network, and we really want to keep everybody safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Maddie. Yeah, we've just put together a few key takeaways here from all the slides together. The TTM ecosystem is changing for everyone. Stick with us. We are also learning, and we're pushing as hard as we can. 1st of July 2026 is the date when we're looking for 100% NZG TTM compliance. Don't get left behind. Give it a go. If you've got any questions, please shout out. AT's got plays an active role in providing guidance to the industry in Auckland. As I mentioned before, industry interactions, webinars, information sharing is going to be key for us. We've got a responsibility to manage the network in a coordinated way. If we all to use a cliche term, row in the same direction, we all stand to gain. And yeah, just as we transition, challenge yourself, question the practices, move away from the old ways of working, and we should see benefits. And then, as Maddie mentioned, the mass movement of people for events brings along its own problems and issues. I think that's about it for our presentation. We're opening up the Q&A now, so please stick a post in the questions, and we'll either talk about it, or if we can't kind of verbalize an answer or type something in the chat, we'll come back to you, certainly. I might just be the announcer of these questions. Is it truly possible to identify and predict every potential risk in advance? This might be a multi-answer question. No. However, we've got a lot of people with a lot of experience, and that I think is a good place to start. Putting down all the known hazards and expected risks and work from there. So no, it's impossible to predict all known risks, and I would assume that if the large and long risk assessments are coming from people who are trying to predict and list down every single potential risk, the key for us has been risk appropriate management as appropriate of the risks. So this involves going to site, seeing what the local conditions are. Unfortunately, we can't put a cookie cutter over the site any longer. There does have to be some site-specific considerations. So we encourage everybody to take a flexible view with their planning. Arun, if AT is the secondary RCA approver, for example, installing of advanced warning regulatory signs, and when the detour goes through the AT network and the main works are on the NZTA network, do we need to have the 3 Cs? If yes, can these be arranged within a short time frame, such as 3 to 4 weeks prior to the works? Also, what is considered good time frame practice for these 3 Cs? I'll go first. Maybe Lawrence has also got some ideas, but I would say yes. You can have a secondary approver conversation 3 to 4 weeks in advance. But as far as good time frame practice for these 3 Cs engagements go, it's as early as possible in the planning time frame. And I realize that many of you in the contracting space, you do receive your instructions and contracts with quite short timeframes. So my appeal today would be for as soon as you know about something that you feel needs engagement with AT, reach out then and don't leave it too late.
Thanks, Kevin. I'll just cover off. So I would foresee the current situation carrying on, whereby we are if we're the secondary approver. At the moment, if there's a conversation needed, there isn't much opportunity for conversation at the moment, as usually these come through quite late in the piece. But if you did want to have a conversation early on, by all means do reach out to us to have that conversation. But if a lot of them are existing detours for existing routes and existing closures on the motorway network. So if they've been in place for a while, unless there's something that you wish to change or a reason that you want to change that, then by all means do have a conversation with us. But otherwise, I would see that the status quo would continue on.
Thanks, Lawrence. Fang, during the planning phase, to start engaging with the car team, how do we know which car team member to discuss with? Fang, you probably just get a hold of us, and if it's, yeah, we'll work something out internally. If my limited knowledge of my work sites and the car team's process, yeah, Lawrence has got some extra info for us.
Just on that, Fang, at the moment, if you have a works coordination meeting, one or two of my team will attend that meeting, and so the hope is that they will then pick up the car when it comes in. Unfortunately, what happens at the moment is sometimes the people from the contracting side that are at that meeting don't let the car team member know when the car goes in, so it just sits in the queue and someone else may pick it up. One of the things I said we were looking at before is an enhancement to the system in the future, whereby that notes and things from that works coordination meeting will travel through. So the car or a pseudo car will get created right at the front. So those notes will carry on. And therefore, the hope is that the ability will be there to nominate the team member who was in the meeting into that car, so that we will continue through that. They will not have to relitigate a lot of the conversation that was had earlier on.
Thanks, Lawrence. Gavin, if I could just jump in, Gavin, I'll just invite in Tracy to Berkan to answer that question on how will the NZG TTM transition and the car team to council transition be managed to mitigate project delays.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan. And hi, everybody. Thank you for coming along to our webinar number 2. The nice thing, Aaron, is it's a good question, and I was waiting for someone to ask it, but the nice thing is that the transition is staged. Our transition to NZG TTM happens on the 1st of July 2026, and we'll still be separately AT at that point in time. As we currently sit, we've got a piece of draft legislation that talks about transport reform and the road activities transferring to council, but that bill hasn't actually been enacted yet. And we anticipate that'll happen sometime next year, maybe around the first quarter of next calendar year. And then we'll have about a 6-month process where we understand where everyone's going to sit if we transfer to council. So then, as I say, the nice thing is the timing's staggered. We will have already gone NZG TTM before any transport reform happens. And my understanding is that there will be personnel continuity. So we might be performing a council function as the road controlling authority, but I pretty much expect the people that you're dealing with will be the same and systems will be the same. So we shouldn't have any dislocation in transitioning to the new entity. Lots more to be seen as we go forward into next year, but don't think it will be too much of an issue.
Thanks, Tracy. Rajendra, ATOC says only RCAs can contact them. how can we do early contact with ATOC before submitting CARS TMPs as part of 3Cs? Lawrence.
Thanks, Reginda. So currently that is ATOC's specification because of the volume of contacts that they were getting. However, for early engagement, they are invited to all the works coordination meetings. So there is a member from ATOC there. But once you get to the CAR stage, if the TMP that you submit needs to go to ATOC, they asked us to only be the people that contact them due to the number of the volume of contacts that they were getting, which again was a lot of phone calls and things, etc. So that was at ATOC's request, and we have abided by that. So any change in that area, apart from works coordination, would have to come from ATOC. Thank you.
I can't see any more new posts, Dan.
No, I don't see any at the moment. So
No.
if there are no further questions and answers, we can bring the webinar to a close. I'll just remind everyone that we will make available a copy of the slide deck and a recording of the webinar will be posted onto the TTM webpage. So if for those that you don't know about it, their TTM webpage is basically outlining all the things that AT are doing, and we're keeping engaged with the industry. You can subscribe to notifications from that webpage, and you'll get information about up and coming webinars, release of information such as practice notes, guides, and other engagement that we'll be doing over the coming 6 months as we transition towards 1 July 2026. There's also quite a lot of links on there to a lot of other support information, such as the actual NZTA guide to temporary traffic management itself, some other industry material from the ISG, and NZ Events Association have released a practice note, which is, as Maddie referred to, a good read if you're working in that special events space. So I think we'll bring it to a close. Thank you for attending. Thanks to Gavin, Lawrence, Maddie, and Tracy for their time today. We'll be holding webinars 3 and 4, as it says there, in the new year. So look out for invites in March, May time, and we will be covering off assurance, compliance, and monitoring in those future webinars. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your days.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the attendance, and we'll see you next year.